Alright lads, welcome to this video on health and safety in the woodwork room, okay? So before we get started, typically of a normal time anyway, I do a class on health and safety just to run you through the basics of the room to make sure everything is safe to use and that you just know what you're at. So unlike any other classroom, the woodwork room is different, I suppose, because it's actually a functioning workshop. So there's lots of tools in there. There's lots of machines as well, some of which you will use as you get older, some of which you'll never use, only ones that I will use, things like the table saw, alright? So it's important to become familiar with basically things in the woodwork room like safety features, what to do and what not to do, alright? The main thing I suppose in the woodwork room is to have a bit of common sense, alright? So if you think something's dangerous, don't do it, okay? Firstly, there's risks and hazards involved, okay? You get in your car in the morning, there's a risk of driving the car. Just like coming into the woodwork room, there's always going to be a risk working with tools, okay? Same as playing any sport, you can get injured, okay? So it's just about thinking about the risks and hazards. So a hazard is something that may cause injury. A risk is the chances or possibility of the injury occurring, okay? So as part of, I suppose, my job in the room is to make the hazard and the risk as low as possible for you in the classroom. I.e., for example, I'd show you how to use a tool or a machine before you'd actually go and do it. That would severely reduce the risk. Why? Because you've actually been shown how to operate it correctly. So hopefully that makes sense to you. Alright? Then there is safety guidelines in the workshop, alright? So there's a few different safety guidelines in terms of the workshop and the work area, using tools safety and using power tools safely, alright? So you'll be using two different types of tools, power tools and hand tools. A hand tool is like your tenon saw or your chisel. A power tool would be more than likely a drill, okay? So something battery or electrical operated. So there's different rules kind of for each. Like I said, use common sense, okay? Now, this here, I want you to take this down into your notes, alright? This is safety guidelines for the workshop. Okay, so we'll take this down. You can pause the video if you want. I'm just going to read down through them to explain them, okay? So, store coats and bags neatly. In our woodwork room, we leave them outside the door, lined up nicely along the wall. They're not fired in the middle of the hall, okay? Because that would be equally as much of a risk as leaving them inside the room. Other schools have racks to put them inside. We don't. We leave them outside, okay? The reason for that, trip hazard. You can trip over the straps of the bag when you're walking around the room, alright? Because you might be looking at doing something else. You mightn't see the strap. So, bags and coats outside. Always keep your bench tidy, okay? This is just a generally good tip in regards to working in the workshop. If you're done with a tool, put it away before you take out another one, okay? Always follow the teacher's instructions. That's key, okay? I'm not going to tell you to do something dangerous. I'll be the opposite. I'll be telling you how to do something safely, okay? So if I tell you to do something, do it. And if I tell you not to do something, don't do it. If you're not sure of something, ask. That's a good one, okay? That can be applied to any class in school. It's good advice. If you don't know how to do something, or if I just shown you how to do something and you can't remember, ask. That's what I'm paid to be there for, alright? Always walk around the room. So there's lots of sharp things around the room. You're walking around, there's corners of benches. If you were to trip, if you're running, you could bang your head off and seriously injure yourself. Make sure you walk, okay? Then, never throw anything, that's obvious, and report all accidents. So if you cut your hand or anything with a chisel, alright, make sure you come up to me, give you plasters. If you get something in your eye, it can be washed out, alright? Things like that very rarely happen. But don't be too proud to come up and ask for help, alright? So if you do injure yourself, or you break a tool or something like that, tell me. And then the last one that's not on here that I want you to write down is, you never enter the room unless I'm there. So if the door's wide open, the lights are on, but there's nobody in, you stand outside the room until I come and tell you to come in. So, that's fair enough. I think that's common sense, okay? So just take them down. Now, safety guidelines in terms of tools, alright? So, in terms of tools like a chisel, mallets, saws, tri-squares, marking gauge you will be using, alright? Always carry all tools by your side. More than likely things like chisels, you won't be bringing them anywhere except from your locker beside you to the top of the bench. Other tools maybe like saws or coping saws that are hung up on the far side of the room. You might have to carry them across, alright? So keep them by your side. Use your personal protective equipment, alright? This is shortened to PPE. PPE is things like goggles, and of course now in COVID times, the one PPE that everyone wears is a mask, alright? So make sure you wear that properly above your nose. Keep your hands and fingers behind the cutting edge of the tool. If you have both hands, as you can see in the photo, on the top of the photo there on the right hand side, is both hands are behind the edge of the chisel, you cannot cut yourself. So you'll find a lot of people at the start try to hold the piece with one hand and chisel with the other towards their hand. That is going to end in disaster, let me tell you that from experience, alright? Always work away from your body when using sharp cutting tools. So if you're using a Stanley knife or anything like that, you never drag it towards you, you always cut away from you. And then take great care when handing tools to others, alright? So always hand them the handle first. Nowadays, this is an older PowerPoint, we don't really share tools, alright? You keep your own tools, everyone has their one. It reduces the contact between sharing between people with COVID, okay? So what I'll ask you to do is take down the first 4 bullet points. So take down the head and safety guidelines and the first 4 bullet points. You can leave out that bottom one there because we don't necessarily share that many tools anymore. Then, safety guidelines, alright? So this is in terms of dealing with materials. So, brush dust from the bench, never blow the dust away, alright? So you can't blow them with, not to blow it with, you just brush it. If you do tend to blow dust away with, say, likes of an air compressor, it can send it all up in the air. It's better just to brush them. Wear safety goggles and dust mask when sanding or using the sanding machine. That goes without saying. All you will have your mask on anyway. But just make sure to wear your glasses, okay? You have one set of eyes, you don't get a spare set. Get into a habit of wearing your goggles the whole time when you're using power tools, alright? Protective gloves should be worn when handling hot materials. We won't be handling hot materials. And wear the correct protective equipment when using chemicals such as adhesives and finishes. The adhesives and finishes, so that's adhesive is glue, and the finishes they'll be safe to use. It won't matter if you get them in your hands, alright? So there's nothing you need to take down on that. The only 2 things you need to take down so far were the safety guidelines of the workshop. You can pause that. And then the first 4 bullet points of the safety guidelines of tools. Alright. Now, the next one then is in terms of safety signage. Alright. So there's loads of signs around the woodwork room. If you go up to a machine, have a look, familiarize yourself with the signs and what do they mean. Alright. So, what signs do? The signs warn about possible danger, alright? They give important information about safe procedures and equipment, so they might tell you how to do something correctly. And always read the instructions on containers, okay? So if you're using a varnish or something that says wear gloves on it, wear gloves, there's a reason for that, okay? So there's 3 different types of signs here. There's one that informs you of dangers. The second one is more of a helping or kind of a pointing where things are, the green one. So the fire exit and the first aid station. If you're looking first aid and you walk into the woodwork room, it's on the very far left hand side of the room. I'll show you that when you're back in, alright? And then the last one, then the blue one, is about your PPE, your personal protective equipment. So you can see there's gloves, boots, goggles, masks, earmuffs and a face shield, okay? You will use the face shield when you're using a machine called a wood turning lathe. I won't be using that till second year. The main ones you'll be using is goggles and your mask, okay? So everyone should be getting a set of goggles in there. You should have got given it during your tasters, alright? Now, you can take down this one here then. So, personal protective equipment. I want you to take this down. That's abbreviated or shortened, is another word for abbreviated, into PPE. Okay, so if someone says to you about your PPE, it's to do with things like eye protection, face protection, dust masks, and ear protection. Alright. In there, necessarily you won't have ear protection on you because we won't be using anything too loud. The only thing that's loud in the woodwork room you might hear going from times is the planer thicknesser, and the only person allowed to use that is me. Okay, so the main one you will need is your goggles. Alright, that's the main PPE you will wear in there. So take down PPE and then just take down eye protection, face protection, dust masks and face masks, and ear protection. Alright, and you can see then there's photos on the bottom. There's loads of different types of masks. Alright, there's ones here that have filters in them. You'll see lads that do spray cars. If you watch any kind of car programs or anything like that, you'll see they have these really expensive masks on them. We don't need them, you just use the small dust masks. You have different types of earmuffs. You have earmuffs and then you have earplugs as well. Okay. And then there is the workshop safety features. Alright, you don't need to take anything down here. There's different types of switches in the woodwork room. There's one up by me, up by my desk. Alright, that's the main power going to the room. So if I turn that off, there's a key with it. It will turn all the machines off in the woodwork room. Okay, that's the isolation switch of the room. Then in terms of emergency stop buttons, every piece of equipment that's electronically operated, so likes of a battery drill won't have an emergency stop, but things like this bandsaw, the belt sander, okay, and the pillar drill, which is the big drill that stands up, you might use that in metalwork, all have an emergency stop button. Anything goes wrong, you just hit that, it will cut off the power automatically to the machine. So some of these are located in the middle on top of the machine, alright, and other ones of them are on the very bottom, right next to the floor, and they're actually called a kick stop. I'll show you these when we're back in. You can kick them with your foot as well to stop them. So if, for God forbid, your hands got tangled up or something, you can actually kick it with your foot. Okay, so there's one of them on the saw I use, and there's one on the bandsaw in the room as well. Okay, so they're there for a reason. If anything ever goes wrong, you hit them. Okay, it's not just up to me to hit and use compress them as well. Okay, so they're emergency stop. Like Ronseal does what it says on the tin, stops in case of emergency. Then there's guards then. You probably would have seen that guard on the pillar drill on the right hand side already. And then there's dust extraction as well. So the likes of the belt sander in the woodwork room, before you go use that, you turn on the extractor. I'll show you where that is when we're in there. So over by the first aid kit, it's the big green button. You press that, it sucks all the dust up away, so the room ain't full of dust. And then lastly then there's transformers. We don't really use them in there, and obviously I suppose all of you know what a fire extinguisher, when you come in the door, it's directly on the wall beside you to the left hand side when you come in the door, so just in case anything ever goes wrong, to work a fire extinguisher, it's there. Okay, so that's your quick run through on health and safety. Obviously every time we use a new tool or we use a new machine, I will actually show you where all the safety features are and how to operate it correctly. So most of them all have an emergency stop button, but they're in different places. They all have guards, but they're in different places. So in terms of the theory behind it, it's all the same, except when you go to use a new machine, you just have to make yourself familiar with it to make sure you know where everything is. Okay, so health and safety is your heading. Main thing to take down is this list here, the safety guidelines in the workshop. Alright, the 4 points of safety tools, and then last but not least, your PPE. Okay, so your different type of protective equipment. You will need to make sure to bring your goggles always with you. Okay, if you leave them in, if you have, get yourself a folder for woodwork, put all your stuff in it. Like I said last day, you can pile it all together, put your goggles in it, and leave them in there. That means you'll never be without them, because you have to have them with you. Okay, they're essential. That's basic run through health and safety. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me.